Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Hawk Talon. You'll have to excuse me, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I am still very enthusiastic about this knife despite what my voice might sound like. I'm really excited. This isn't mine. This was a sample sent by Hawk. It'll go back, but I, like many of you, have pre-ordered this knife and am anticipating its arrival. I'm really excited about it. For those of you who missed the pre-order or weren't aware of it, you might be wondering, what's the point of doing a review if it's post pre-order, if we can't actually buy it at the moment? Because just like pretty much everything that Hawk has ever made, it will almost certainly stay ridiculously popular. There's no way that this is the only run of the Hawk Talon he'll ever do. So I'm sure that we'll see this again in the future. If you're wondering, how do I get my hands on this stuff? You definitely need to be following Hawk Knives on Instagram, and you also need to sign up for their newsletter on their website. That's how the people who pick these up via pre-order, they signed up for the newsletter, and then they got their pre-order link through that newsletter. So that's essentially how that happened. These are expensive knives, right? So I'm going to tell you guys right at the beginning, if you are not a fan of hyper expensive knives or small batch knives, this isn't going to be the video for you. But most of you watching are probably familiar with Hawk. So these are going to be above the territory of Hinderer knives or Chris Reeve knives or your USA Demco knives. These are going to be in a much higher full USA small batch tier. And that's exactly what these are. These are semi-custom, hyper-precision, in-house small batch USA knives with some super unique elements, including the detent and lock, which is the Hawk lock and toggle detent. So here's a look at the toggle detent in action on the Serge Panchenko and Hawk Rook. We can see it because of the Ultim front scale. It's really cool and completely and totally unique to Hawk knives. So this does not use Omega springs or anything like that. It's a completely unique mechanism that is incredibly satisfying to operate. And I think it is actually implemented better on this knife. I think the whole presentation, the whole experience with this knife is even better. As somebody who owns the Rook, I'm just really excited to get my hands on this. So anyways, thanks so much to Hawk for letting me showcase this. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of the Hawk Talon here. So the overall length is coming in at just right at 8 inches, maybe slightly under. It might actually be about 7.9, but very close. Blade length is coming in at 3.5 inches, and your cutting edge is coming in at 3.25. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons. Any custom scales you find in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. So up against the 8010 and the 8020.5, you can see it's, I guess, closer to the size and space that it occupies versus something like the 8020.5. Nowhere near as big or robust as the 8010, though it is thicker than you might realize. We'll look at that here in just a moment. Up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3. Closer, I'd say, to the size of the PM2. I don't know. I guess you could say it's kind of right in between. It has more cutting edge than both. And then finally, up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How is the action? This action is satisfying in a way that is not accomplished by anything else that I've ever experienced. It's a lot of people, kind of rate action based on pivot smoothness alone, or just like you have your flipper tab or your thumb stud, and then the detent tuned to the flipper or the thumb stud, and it's a ceramic ball detent on a titanium frame lock or liner lock, and the break of that detent, and then it's like the bearing action and the thwack into the open position. And then there are knives where they have locking systems and operation that's just different. This is one of those things that is different because the toggle detent feels different. The break of it is different than a detent ball. It doesn't feel like, and the other thing is that the flipper tab is up here. It has this sort of little Whoville lump at the top that you pull down, and it's kind of like diagonally this way, which is very, very different than your typical flipper tab. And the sound and the clicks and the clacks, they're all totally different. Anybody who has handled the Rook or anything that utilizes, from Hawk that utilizes a similar system, you guys will say the same thing. It's different. But it's not just different, it's ridiculously high quality. Something that Hawk is known for is precision beyond comprehension. And I know that that's a difficult thing to really put a lot of stock into, because nowadays everybody is making like ultra precision stuff. Chinese manufacturers are getting to the point where it's so good and everything is so good that it feels like things are just not special anymore. And that's the beauty of Hawk knives. They are special outside of what we experience all the time. Your average knife enthusiast can get on Blade HQ and buy a super high-end Chinese production knife for about $250 and experience, precision that was unheard of 10 years ago, right? So it's really hard to impress the modern knife enthusiast. And if I were to narrow down, a bunch of companies that are still able to do that, Hawk would easily be on that list, alongside people like, Brian Winters from Winterblade and a number of others. But Hawk knives are still there. They're still special little gems in the knife world, and Hawk knives is definitely one of those. So the action is truly spectacular. And by the way, yes, you can absolutely use these little studs, which are both open position and closed position stops. You can see the little cutouts right here on the back of the knife, and there's also a little cutout right there on the titanium frame that houses the stops in closed position. Very, very perfectly nested, and just very satisfying to see those studs fit so perfectly into the frame. I would expect nothing less from Hawk, to have all of this together and all of this complete in one package. It's just really, really cool. So anyways, action good, action thumbs up. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. So thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It is perhaps thicker than some people might expect, a little bit thicker than something like the Para 3, and that's because we have big titanium liners underneath these carbon fiber overlays or scales, right? I actually did carry this quite a bit, because this is a pre-production sample or a prototype, and he said go ahead and carry it and use it, and I was like, well, heck yeah, this is going back to him anyway, so why not? So I carried this and used it, and it was such a joy. I still wanted to be careful with it, because I think he only had 10 prototypes, and it was nice of him to send it to me. But truthfully, I didn't test this in a way that was different than any other knife that I carry and test. I just carry it and use it like a regular knife. So I wasn't out batoning with it or doing anything crazy, no destruction testing or anything like that. But I did really enjoy this. Every time I got it out to use it, it just put a huge smile on my face, which is exactly what this type of knife in this territory should do. You're buying this not because you think that you're spending hundreds more on utility. You're buying something unique and special, something that is uniquely crafted, something that is made to put a smile on a specific knife, like somebody from this specific corner of the knife world. It's made to put a smile on your face, and it does do that. Tenfold for sure. Let's do length and height up against the PM2 and Para 3. It carries slightly bulky. I don't want to say that it carries heavy or large, but it does carry slightly bulky. So some people are going to notice that. Other people will not. About maybe, including that top flipper tab, is actually almost exactly the same size as the PM2. Height-wise, not quite. So somewhere in between, but a little bit heavier. So weight, these should all weigh the same, because to my knowledge, you're going to have the same. I mean, it's all like some variation of this special carbon fiber. They've got like 4 different options. You had the blue, you had the black, you had the white, right? So it should all be the same. To my knowledge, he did not do a full titanium option, which admittedly I would have gone for, like I did with my Rook, but that's okay. So the weight on this guy is coming in at 4.4 ounces, which is not a shock at all. Your balance is actually pretty much right there in the middle of that forward, or that primary choil position, primary grip position, right? So it does actually feel pretty balanced. it manages to feel robust and solid, which truthfully, that's a big deal for me. If I'm going to spend this much money on a knife, I don't think there's a problem with smaller knives that cost a lot of money. I just don't get the warm and fuzzies from small, thin, almost fragile feeling hyper expensive knives. Some people, there's the weight of the knife has nothing to do with the final price tag, right? But me personally, it does make me feel a lot better about the purchase to feel solidity in the thing. And man, does this feel solid. This feels ready to go. Definitely. It does not feel flimsy in any way. It feels very robust. So that's nice. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'll get out my tools as per usual. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. Unfortunately, we have a Hawk proprietary pivot system, which is not my favorite thing in the world, but admittedly, it does look cool, right? Oftentimes when you're getting into this territory, specialized hardware is pretty common. I always like the ability to adjust my knives easily with something like Torx. We don't have that here, but okay. The body screw back here is going to be a T6. It's not a T6, is it? It might actually be slightly smaller. Did I get the wrong thing? What do we got here? We got a T6. Did you use a T? Let's look. So what we have here in the light, we have a T6. Gavin, are these... Now, it feels like the depth is correct, but did you use a T5? No, it's a T6. I would have preferred that screw was a T8 or bigger, but that's okay, right? As long as you have the right tools for the job, which is going to be a bit tricky unless for some reason he sends the special tool required to take this apart with the knives. And admittedly, I don't know if he does. But yeah, unless you have that, it's going to be a little bit tricky. You could probably make something, but I wouldn't do that. I would send it in if you needed to. Anyways, most people are not going to need to take these things apart. So the locking system and the pivot system are set up in a way that you, for the most part, won't need to do that if you decide to use it. Which this is very much a knife that he builds with the intention of people actually using them. I think a lot of people assume that once you get past $200, $300, $400 that people just aren't going to use this stuff or they're not made to be used. No, that's so far from the truth. But it's a common assumption, right? Because you're thinking, oh, the real tools are here and all the fancy pocket jewelry is here. So this stuff is not supposed to be used and this stuff is. It's very wrong. You have stuff from each side of the fence that's either meant to be used and very durable, or meant to be used and very fragile, or not meant to be used and still kind of durable, and not meant to be used and very fragile, right? It just depends. But yeah, you definitely get, there are definitely knives like this that are both expensive and still tools, right? But anyways, let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness of this knife real quick. I think we're actually looking at something like 140 plus, maybe even thicker. Yeah, 150 thousandths actually. So on the thicker side, this is, by the way, M390 to my knowledge. That was what was listed on the Instagram post. I know he's used 20 CV in the past. I even saw him respond to somebody asking if in the future he would consider using materials like MagnaCut or Vanax, to which he replied, not MagnaCut, but Vanax and definitely some others. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, the blade steel on these guys, to my knowledge, is going to be M390. Let's see here. We've weighed it. We've done the hardware check. Let's go ahead and move into the meat and potatoes here. This is a knife that not only has a unique aesthetic and a really beautiful, look at how the edges of these scales meet up perfectly with the chamfered edges of the titanium frame underneath. That is so nice to look at. Hawk knives always look distinctly industrial, like they look like tools, but they're also I think there's a lot of people who would walk by this knife and not think anything of it. It looks like a pocket knife, right? But the more you look, the more you realize that there's really special stuff going on. If you're a knife enthusiast, you're gonna pick up on this right away. There's a ton of things with this knife that are non-typical, right? Including, again, the proprietary pivot, the fact that the frame is titanium, the precision of the chamfering, right? The pocket. This is the special Hawk pocket clip that kind of has that spring-loaded teeter-totter. It's really nice, actually. Really like that. But a lot of elements. But yeah, to the average person, it's just going to look like a regular pocket knife. But after they pick it up and play with it, they'll realize this is totally different. It doesn't operate or feel like anything else. And so to have a really ergonomic and very like natural organic profile for use, on top of that really special feeling and that really unique, I don't know, that X factor, right? It's really special. I was so happy to pre-order this and so happy to have the opportunity to add something to this, add something like this to my collection. Because as time goes on, just like anybody else, I get more and more and more picky, and I get progressively more bored with the releases from the modern knife world. I'm just, as much as I still want to cover the standard stuff, because there's plenty of people entering the knife world for the first time and going on their own journey. So it's still important for me to cover a lot of this, basic stuff that's very similar to what we have currently or what we've seen over the last 10 to 20 years. Me personally, though, when I add something to my collection, I want it to have something special. I want it to have unique elements. And this has it, right? This has so many unique elements. Mainly, it's the satisfaction, the feeling of action, the manipulation of the locking system, which is so easy. Those steps right there, you just pull down and it allows the blade to disengage from its locked position. But playing with it, like fidgeting with it, is so satisfying. It's so easy to do. It's so natural. These are just awesome. It's the same thing that I experienced with my Rook, but better. I also like the size more. I also like the more classic knife profile. On top of that, this has a hollow ground blade, and it is very, very aggressive. This is actually a really performance-oriented slicer, and with that blade profile being, I don't know what you'd call this, right? You have belly, you've got a swedge up here that it rises up, and it's kind of like a prominent swedge out here towards the nose, but you can get your finger up behind the tip and do some draw cuts, but thumb stud not in the path or anything like that, and nothing, no logos or anything on the blade, because the logo is actually on the scale, which is pretty cool, actually. I like the Hawk Talon's logo, which has always been Hawk's logo. I like having that on the scale. It actually looks pretty cool, but nothing on the blade, so the presentation looks really, really good. I also like the dark stone washing on the blade. That's going to make wear over time just sort of blend in, and it's nice. It looks nice. It doesn't look cheap. It still looks premium. But your knife is essentially not going to change in aesthetic as you use it. Sure, it'll take on scars and marks and things like that, but everything is going to blend really, really well. Maybe a little bit more markup on the carbon fiber, right? Less so if you get, a not, well, I don't know if it'll be more or less aesthetic wear on a colored carbon fiber versus, like the Black Dunes option. But I don't think, I don't know. In my experience, carbon fiber that looks like this doesn't wear aesthetically poorly. Versus like your regular flat, like the stuff that wears the worst is just the flat, shiny stuff that you find on the really inexpensive knives, right? Or the laminate carbon fiber that you see on like Spyderco knives. I feel like the marks blend better with stuff like this. But anyways, that's all beside the point. That's if you decide to use it. We have a backspacer here that starts almost flush, not quite, sort of sinks into the frame and then rises. The frame sinks below the backspacer. Nice, heavy gear pattern traction here. And then we have a nice big lanyard hole. No mounting position for left-handed carry, which is a bummer. I mean, there's a screw over here. I wish that he would have found a way to do that, but not the case there. This is a really, really awesome clip. It works really well. Number one, because the clip in the in the standard position is actually angled down, which is normally a problem because it would make it hard to get in and out of your pants. This makes it ergonomically just about perfect. I mean, it is so comfortable. I can't stress that enough. But when when you go to put the knife in your pocket, your fingers are in this position naturally because this is where you're going to be putting the knife in your pocket. So you just lift up, and this goes right over the pocket seam, goes into the pocket and let go, and then you've got all the benefit of it clamping down on your pocket and staying firmly in place. And when you're ready to pull it out, you push down and pull. It's awesome. I mean, this solves so many issues with pocket clips in general. I love it. I love this pocket clip so much. But anyways, your open position lockup is absolutely solid. I have never had an issue with a Hawk locking system, whether it's this or like the Hawk deadlock, right? The OTF. It's hardcore. Like these things lock up completely and totally solid. I actually asked Gavin what he would rank the strength of his locking system out of 10. And he said, it's not the strongest lock in the world. I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. So I appreciate, I don't know what his, if he's putting a triad lock at 10, I don't know what his parameters are, but that was his actual answer, right? Which is good enough for me. The way that I'm going to use these knives is not going to require an enormous amount of lock strength. But if Gavin would put it at a 7 out of 10 himself, that's definitely good enough for me. For me, it's really the feeling of the toggle detent and the feeling of the action, all that is just awesome. No blade play up, down, left, or right. There's absolutely no stick whatsoever. There's no pivot lash. Unbelievably glassy smooth in here. I cannot explain. Like, look at this. It's falling down to the start position of the toggle detent, which is right here, and then click into the closed position. Very, very unique feeling. There's nothing else out there that feels exactly like this outside of Hawk's own knives, right? Centering has stayed absolutely perfect and spot on since I received this, but this is a pre-production prototype. I have a feeling the production ones will be exactly the same. And then there's no detent lash in the closed position. There's no movement whatsoever until you start to pull on this and overcome it. But in the actual closed position, there's no movement, which is great. How much were these for pre-order? They were expensive, $950. A lot of you are going to remember that he had mentioned his target price being $750. I read that too. And I thought, no way is he going to get those things down to set. There's just no way. This was back when he had first announced the project. Now, I was hoping that, we would see a cap, around $850 to $900. $950 is up there for sure. But there's just nothing else out there like this. He's got his own thing going on, right? And I know that it was worth it to a lot of people. And the truth is when I heard the final price tag, I don't know that I skipped a beat. I was like, okay, I'm still going to order it. And I know that a lot of you felt the same way, right? And I don't know that Hawk is really like, oh, whatever, people will just buy whatever, they'll pay whatever I put the price tag on. It's just building something like this is so stupidly expensive. Doing everything, and he's like, it's not like he can make like 10,000 of these. They're not being made the same way as like Benchmade knives. These are in a totally different universe, right? Now, you may not value all in-house small batch USA production. You may think, I don't value that personally, so it's not worth it to me. That's fine. But it's like I always say, you not valuing it doesn't change Hawk's cost. The cost of creating these things is incredibly high, right? And you can justify that if you have a market who will buy these things, who will pay for these things that have high costs. And Hawk does, right? So this type of thing is simply not going to my knowledge, Hawk has no plans to create less expensive production versions of these things. Like, we're not going to see, production Chinese versions of these knives. So this is the only way to get this stuff right now. If it's not in your ballpark, it's not in your ballpark. There's nothing wrong with that. This is for a select group of knife enthusiasts, a select type of knife enthusiasts. And, the people who pick it up are really, really going to enjoy it. But I think you guys know that. I think a lot of people watching this, like, that you're going to enjoy it. And you're just watching this video in anticipation to kind of like be excited along with me. And I totally get that. You're going to love it, right? It's $950 well spent, though admittedly, I would have liked to see this a little bit less. I would have liked to see it at about $850 to $900, but there was no way he was ever getting these to $750. I mean, let's be real. There's just this is not a $750 knife. It just was never going to happen. Yeah, this is great. This is easily one of my favorite knives that I've reviewed on this channel, which you guys know I have a select playlist for those knives, my favorite knives of all time. So this is not a knife that I'm going to openly recommend to the average person for obvious reasons. You don't need to spend $950 on a pocket knife to get a good tool. And that's usually what I reserve that playlist for, right? Even though sometimes expensive things make it onto that playlist, this isn't something that I'm going to say everybody needs, right? But I am going to put it on my favorite knives of all time playlist. This is awesome. So that's going to be it today, guys. Thanks again to Gavin for sending this in, letting me take a look. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.